Well, hello and welcome or welcome back to Read Becca, and welcome to Mid-Month Book Bash. It's my favorite monthly event. So Mid-Month Book Bash is a monthly reading event, the second weekend of every month, and that is championed by Doris from Aldine Books. You can read whatever you want, but the goal is to boost your reading by extending your weekend a bit and focusing on reading as much as you can from Friday to Monday. So I don't have a long weekend or anything, but I'm just finished work for Friday. So it's evening, I'm about to wind down with some books, and I have selected a theme for my mid-month book bash reading this month. So my theme this month is taken from library books that I picked up last month, and they're due back, but the theme is actually nonfiction about doing nothing. So the first book that I have is very direct to that. It's Rental Person Who Does Nothing. And this is written by Shoji Morimoto, and I think this is translated from Japanese. Yes, translated by Dawn Nodding. So I don't know very much about this, but I had heard about it before from Willow Talks Books, and was interested in it very much, but I thought it was fiction. This is in fact a memoir. So the beginning of the synopsis says, Shoji Morimoto was constantly being told by his boss, it makes no difference whether you're here or not, and that his presence contributed nothing to the company, which really sucks. Morimoto began to wonder whether a person who does nothing could still have actual value and a place in the world. Perhaps he could turn doing nothing into a service. With one tweet, Rental Person was born. So it sounds wonderful. I love Japanese translated works. I just generally very much vibe with Japanese culture. So I think this is gonna work very well for me, hopefully. And then I have kind of an odd one. This is In Praise of Wasting Time by Ellen Lightman. So I think that's going to be very much on theme. This is a book from a TED Talk. I don't know if you'll be able to see that, but I haven't seen the TED Talk, so I do intend to watch the TED Talk as well. And this is very short, likewise. So both of these are quite short books. So those will be easy to read over the weekend. But interestingly, there's a whole line of these that kind of expand on TED Talks, and all of them look very interesting to me. So if this works out well, I will probably pick up some more. But I'm assuming he's just going to muse on the topic of why wasting time is good for us. So we will see. And that, of course, is appealing to me right now. So the third is a bit more of a stretch on the theme, but I also picked up Praying with Jane Eyre, Reflections on Reading as a Sacred Practice by Vanessa Zoltan. And I have actually already started this one because this one is not long, but it's a little bit longer. So I didn't want to push myself really over this weekend, appropriate to the theme, right? So I started it, and after a couple days, I'm halfway through. This is not about doing nothing as much as I thought. I kind of assumed from the subtitle that it would be much more on reading as meditation, kind of as a quiet, thing to focus on. But it's a lot more than that so far. So I think I will hold off on talking about this one till I'm a little farther in. But it is very much about a enriching view of reading and really sitting with the text that you're reading if you want to. Like, it's fine to read for enjoyment, but if you want to be enriched by a certain book that you really love and want to focus on and spend time on, she is talking about that. So this is my third book, and hopefully I will finish all three this weekend, but we shall see. Ripley is working very hard at doing nothing. Yay, new couches here. Woohoo.
guards didn't start their plague show yet.
$0.50 for every dead rat.
They seem serious. 50 cents? Huh, must be a rich town. That's good. That's very good. Means more money for me. For us. For us, of course.
Happy Saturday morning. We're reading already with In Praise of Wasting Time. I'm liking it so far. So TED Talks are kind of a blend of personal anecdotes, research and science, and motivational speech, I guess. So this is definitely that blend. It feels a little bit more fleshed out than a TED Talk. Obviously this is a little longer than would cover a TED Talk. And he has run through some really interesting topics in brief. So things like the Western world's conception of time and how that's a lot different from other parts of the world, mainly through kind of brief anecdotes. And things like the phases of thinking or problem solving, the ways that having your mind passive or not having a task at hand for your mind to do that you are focused on, letting your mind sit in quiet is very conducive to imagination, creativity, and the fact that a lot of creatives, with some examples, come up with ideas suddenly when they're doing nothing. It's why we all have those shower thoughts, when we're not actively working at it, we have those bursts of insight. So I like that. I like that he's drawing connections between those things and creating a story from that about how valuable downtime can be. There are also some really fantastic illustrations throughout this book, which I didn't expect, but they're great. They are by Dola Sun. Well, I went to the park and it was flooded, so I didn't get as much of a walk in as I wanted to, but some, and I got to see birds, so that was a win, I guess. I did finish In Praise of Wasting Time, and I liked it. It's skimming the surface of this topic, definitely. I feel like he managed to talk a lot about the effects of toxic productivity without bringing up that topic or really expanding on that topic, because that would be a whole other book. So I think that was the right choice. I do feel in the back half, he's focused on a lot on the rise of the culture to do things all the time. So back to the toxic productivity and the fact that there are some correlations to the internet. So this is a quote with references. Since 1990, children have become less emotionally expressive, less energetic, less talkative and verbally expressive, less humorous, less imaginative, less unconventional, less lively and passionate, less perceptive, less apt to connect seemingly irrelevant things, less synthesizing, and less likely to see things from a different angle. The date 1990 approximately coincides with the public emergence of the internet, the rapid increase in speed of communication, and a general increase in the pace of life in general. Go back to that kind of toxic productivity. But he very much is drawing the line for us to the internet as theoretically causal. We're making it seem like maybe that's a cause. And I don't think we can really say that, right? There may be a correlation. And I think as a scientist, that's understood to him, but he drew the line there for the reader. So I don't like that so much. For me, much more likely that the internet is the influence on other areas, things like toxic productivity, the very massive increase in wealth inequality and class disparity that has happened, increase in poverty, lots of those things, the capitalist situation that we are in, where it has just become an increasingly soul-sucking world to live in. That is much more likely to be related to why these things are happening. And even things like where it says less likely to connect seemingly irrelevant things. Sure, that's a positive for the brain as a storytelling engine, but that's maybe not necessarily a positive if you want to focus on only what's tangible and material. So there's a balance there, and also that's just a litany of things that he finds negative. What about the trade-offs that are potentially positives that we've gained since the growth of the internet? Those have been massive. So there's always that sort of balance, and I don't feel like he really interrogated that at all. So interesting, but very light. This contains enough factual references and information that I do feel it was useful. It was a book of a TED Talk, so that's very much what it felt like. So now I'm going to move on to Rental Person Who Does Nothing. And this book is very interesting because I thought it was a fiction book. And surprise, surprise, I found it in the library, in the nonfiction section, as a memoir. So I now don't really know what it's about, if it's about somebody starting a business, renting themselves out to do random things. I'm not sure, but we will see. I'm feeling about 150% better after a shower. Going outside anytime right now is just oppressive and gross. So if you've not lived anywhere that it's hot all summer, pretty much, the humidity, it just hangs on you. Even getting out of the shower, it's sticky immediately and you feel like you can never get dry. So it's just like that all of the time. Anyway, so I am feeling much better though. But I did read about 30 pages of Rental Person Who Does Nothing. I like this very much, and I think the format is great because he lays it out as like an email that he's gotten for a request to do nothing. He's put himself out there advertising that he will take requests to go along with someone on anything that they need someone else with them, not in like a major thing way, just something they're afraid to do alone. And people ask for very random things. Like the first one is just simply someone doesn't want to waste a coffee drink, and they don't think they can drink it all themselves, and so they want someone to go along with them. Yeah, very simple things like that. So it's very mundane. And then he afterward tweets out his experience, more or less, a very short description, just purely the facts of what happened. And after those, he then expands on the idea and what his motives were, and what thought processes he was having going into this, and what he has taken out of these experiences with people. He's not really talking about like their private reasons or motivations in doing these things, or trying to even assess or consider that. He's purely looking at what drove him, and he starts from the place of the inherent value that we have as human beings that's not tied to our productivity or anything that we specifically do. And I love that. And I love that generationally that's a fairly recent thing to even consider, that we aren't compensated simply for being, even though there is inherent value in us, regardless of our level of productivity, right? I love that people are trying to, overturn the apple cart in that area, right now, and working very hard to do so. And hopefully those societal frameworks are changing, and books like this really, really help with that. So he goes from that into an even more radical idea of the burdens that we take on in order to work. And so I want to read just a short little bit here. This didn't feel right to me. It seemed unfair that people who wanted to do the work and didn't feel at all stressed by it got paid the same as people who didn't want to do it and did feel stressed by it. It seemed wrong that I was getting nothing for the mental burden the work was giving me. I can imagine people muttering to themselves, well, there's no such thing as an easy job. And I fully appreciate that there's nothing unusual about work stress, but even so, the situation really bothered me. And I'm right there with you, Guy. I totally agree. And I love that we are interrogating and having conversations about this topic and how much inequity there is in the burdens of work for people. There's so much that's not accounted for in our compensation. We're just assumed to undertake all of these unequal burdens that we have from our personal lives, or not from our personal lives, but they're challenges that exist because of the life and experiences that we have, that we have to undertake a burden in order to do our job, to provide for our corporate overlords, right? So things like, not everyone can live in the same place, right? And there are barriers to living near your work for some people more so than others. So we aren't typically compensated for our commutes, at least in the US. And so you're undertaking a burden there in terms of time or gas money or transit fare. You're undertaking a burden more so if you are a single parent than a two-parent family or a solo worker like myself who doesn't have kids. Some people have invalids that they're caring for in their home, or they're sharing their space with people, and that's disrupting their ability to work. A person who's very stressed out by their work is going to have to spend more time decompressing from their work and creating a better division between their work and their personal life, more likely. And so those are all inequitable things that we aren't compensated for. And I love that we're now thinking about, can we do better? Not just simply, we should accept it because it's always been that way. So yeah, I'm liking. Now I think I'm gonna read a little bit more while my hair dries, and then I've got a ton of chores and errands to do today. And then I think I'm gonna go hang out with a friend and play some games. And I think that's it. And I will be back for some more reading this afternoon, evening, later. I don't know. I probably need to read things not for this vlog because I finished up my long book yesterday, and I really, really need to get started on some of my TBR for the month because we're 2 weeks in. I've read very little, and I had intended to read both Ninth House and Hellbent. Hellbent is the sequel. I had intended to read both of those this month, and I've not even started, and they're both huge books. So I probably need to work on that. I may or may not have another update for you today. We'll see. All right, my day went on longer than I expected, and it's like 10 o'clock at night. So this is going to be a very quick catch up on where I'm ending Saturday at. So I did lots of other stuff. I guess first off, randomly, I didn't have an audiobook. So I have a list on Libby of shorties that are like filler audiobooks in between, because I have one on hold that will be coming in any time, but it hasn't come in yet. So I looked through my shorties and found one that is perfect for this vlog. It is the book of Ichigo Ichie, which I will talk about when I finish. I got about halfway through that one during all of my errands. And I also read a little bit more of Praying with Jane Eyre. I'm up to page exactly 150. So I don't remember where I was before on this one. I haven't really talked about this one, and I'm not really going to spend the time talking about it now. I will definitely catch up on what this book is later. But I think probably like 40 pages-ish on that one. And then I read a little more of Gentle Person Who Does Nothing. I'm up to page 88 in this one. And this one So I guess let's talk quickly about this one. I am continuing to very much enjoy this. After last time I checked in, I think Ripley's coming to say hi. Say hello. Hi. Hi. So after last time I checked in, he has talked more about certain topics, like how he has this expectation on him of what he might want for the future, but that is not something that he connects with. So, for instance, looking back at his work experience, everybody was looking forward to something else they wanted, and he never related to that. So he says, "But the moment the organizer started his introductory speech, I felt uncomfortable. I'm sure there's nobody in the room who doesn't have a dream," he said. "Every one of us thinks about the future." Not sure I do, I thought. His words felt very pushy and repressive. And then he goes on to talk about how if he were asked what his dream is, it would be doing nothing. And so he is literally living his dream right now. And that relates a little bit to me to be praying with Jane Eyre. Whoops. Praying with Jane Eyre. This is a chaotic vlog. Praying with Jane Eyre because she is falling into a trap that I have seen with a lot of people that leave religion and then go back because there are things that they feel are human needs to them, and I see those people talk about those things, and they seek that in religious belief or even traditions, and I've often seen them talk about their feelings as if they are universal or required, and yet I find them unrelatable. And so this feels like that, where he's having that similar moment of, yeah, I just don't relate to having a desire for my future to be something bigger or more than what I have now. And it's okay that I'm already living out this very mundane fantasy that I have to do nothing. I made it reality. So I very much like that. He also, after that, transitioned to a big section where he's speaking on the topic of dealing with clients that don't know how to talk about something or turn to him because they feel like their relationships will change if they talk about something, not anything big, just mundane things that they feel they can't express or talk about on the regular with people they know. And I found that really enlightening to discuss the ways that we can open up more to a stranger than people we know, because their impressions of us would change when we discuss certain topics. Very cool. So anyway, I'm going to leave that there for Saturday night. We will check in tomorrow. Good morning-ish. The morning has gotten away from me. I was up way too late last night checking news and stuff because of a major happening in the world right now, which I'm not even going to mention here. I will bring it up in my bookish week later when I film it. But needless to say, major happenings that are very stressful. Anyway, I have been reading though. I have finished both Rental Person Who Does Nothing and Ichigo Ichie. So, Rental Person Who Does Nothing, I've continued liking very much. So I did really like it, though toward the end, I think it exposed some of him being performative, or it's almost like this is a performance art project for him. He seems to have these ideals, like he's not taking money for this specifically. He only will take reimbursement for his travel expenses. So he's trying to distance himself from that debt feeling, or transactional feeling, I guess, of these interactions that he's having. And it's almost like a hobby for him. But then he also brings up the fact that at times, like, film crews want to follow him around, and he's gained some fame. He doesn't specifically seek it out, it seems like, perhaps, other than that he's doing this all very publicly and tweeting and stuff to draw attention, but he seems to welcome it without necessarily seeking it out, popularity. So I don't know if I love that or how I feel about that. But at the last I checked in, I think he was focused on the duty that you have outside of your specific working role, in work culture, work social interactions, that sort of thing, all of the additional labor. So in the back half of the book, since then, he mainly focused on the same types of emotional labor, time labor, financial labor that you take on to build friendships and just social interactions outside of work, and how heavy that can be. So I love everything that he's talking about topically here, because there is a lot to that, I think, where he specifically talks a lot about the Japanese cultural expectations and that kind of debt that is built between friendships, or even just the need to have finances to go out, to have time to go out, the mental energy to go out to continually build friendships with people. And if you don't have that, or you don't have the ability to upkeep that constantly, you won't be able to build these social connections. So I think it was valuable that he's talking about that. He also mentioned something that I've seen very much in the US, where he talks about certain holidays and things like that, where people are moving away from traditions in a lot of ways because of the expectation, the heaviness that has been placed on it. For myself, at least in my area, and people my age and younger, it seems we've moved away from celebrating Christmas very much. Halloween seems to be the big holiday now because there is so little expectation on it about what you're doing for other people, and like you just kind of dress up for yourself if you want or not and go out and have fun. Whereas Christmas, it built so heavily over the years or couple decades of my childhood and upbringing that many people burnt out, because specifically the boomer generation probably kind of ruined it for us. They made it into this thing where it's so overblown and it has to be a whole ordeal, and it wasn't fun anymore. And every year it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And so I've seen so many of my friends, everyone, 40 and under, seem to just not have an interest in celebrating it anymore very much. So yeah, I definitely connect with so much that he's saying here, and I think the ideas and concepts that he's exploring, the inherent value of people, the distancing himself from monetary value, or from the duty of monetary compensation and transactionalness of interaction with people, whether in work or in social life. Really, really great discussions. So then Ichigo Ichie, the audiobook that I was listening to, Ichigo Ichie is the concept of valuing every moment. And I really like the concept. I liked the layout of the book in general. It felt very similar to In Praise of Wasting Time, where it's like a mix of kind of research, anecdotes, history, a lot about the kind of concepts that are very much about valuing moments and practices that exist in Japanese culture, even down to very basic things like tea ceremonies or going to see the sakura, where it specifically exists as a practice to be in the moment. And so I valued all of that and enjoyed the way it was presented, but it was very, very surface level, very simplistic, and also I don't know that I loved it because the fact that it leaned a little bit into completely optimizing your free time, more or less. So it was kind of in line with Rental Person Who Does Nothing in some ways, while also pushing to like be mindful and practical about optimization, like efficient about how you enjoy every moment and doing nothing. I don't know. So I don't like that optimization and productivizing of your free time. So it was meh, I think. But it was only a 3-hour audiobook, so I'm glad I got it in, because it was one that I had on my list that I wanted to get to. So I think that is all for me for now. I need to go make some food to eat, because I've just been lazing around all morning. So I will check in later. Obviously, I think the only book I have left is Praying with Jane Eyre. So that will be for the rest of the day today and tomorrow as far as this vlog, though I have other things I'm working on. What are you doing? Is that exactly one cat size? It's one cat size couch. It is only continuing to get worse. my day got away from me. It is Monday, and I'm just finally updating you and wrapping this all up at the end of the day. I did read some of Praying with Jane Eyre, the last couple essays this morning, and then I finished it out tonight. So I am done. I somehow managed to read 4 books in one weekend. Amazing. The powers of mid-month book bash. Woohoo. So these were all very good books. I liked everything that I read, at varying degrees, certainly, but I think they were all worth reading. So this is the only one I have not really talked about. I'm kind of glad I waited till the end, because this is a collection of essays on the topic of Vanessa Zoltan, the author, having gone through a career and adulthood and totally shifting her focus from her previous job was kind of in nonprofit management, and she realized there was a lot there that she didn't like and she wasn't getting what she wanted. So she did a complete overhaul and went back to school at Harvard Divinity School. But she's an atheist and of Jewish heritage, so she has a real, ingrained understanding of religiosity and spirituality that draws her, but she doesn't really want to draw that from a god she doesn't believe in. And so she literally goes to divinity school, becomes a chaplain, and I found that really fascinating. So as part of the beginning of this book, she is setting up that background and giving us what the project of this book is, really. So in divinity school, she took the project and went full on into what makes something sacred, and delving deep into a text, a literary text, by choosing with someone who was, it seems like, more experienced, more knowledgeable, a professor in this area. She deep dived into Jane Eyre, and I don't know that she ever mentioned why it was specifically Jane Eyre that she decided to fixate on. But she has done that, and she has turned it into a whole sort of reading ministry that she does on top of being a chaplain. So that on its own was very fascinating. But then she delves into the essays that are topical and are pulling from the text of Jane Eyre and the Jane Eyre story to draw conclusions on topics and what she has learned by deep reading of Jane Eyre. She does also shift to some other books at the back for 1 chapter each, just a couple there. And those were interesting as well, but I think the main section of Jane Eyre essays was really powerful and very cohesive, so I like those, I think, more. This is really varied, though, I would say. It almost lost me at the beginning because the first several essays are very, very memoir. They lean more like 90% memoir, and then a few sentences to tie in something from Jane Eyre, and then the conclusions that are drawn between those memoir examples and anecdotes and Jane Eyre. But fortunately for me, it does not continue on that way through the whole thing. There are much more Jane Eyre focused essays as this goes along. As well, I would say those memoir elements, she is drawing a lot from her family heritage, which does include some pretty harrowing accounts of Holocaust experiences in her family. So beware going in that there are some harrowing stuff separate from Jane Eyre. I would also say, going in, she does completely spoil Jane Eyre, and she warns the fact that she's going to do that right up front, because she kind of has to do a deep dive discussion. So let me quickly read a short bit from this here. I love the idea of sacredness. I want to be called to bigger things outside of myself. I don't want my life to be a matter of distractions from death and then death. I want to surprise myself and to honor the ways in which the world surprises me. I want to connect deeply to others, to the earth, and to myself. I want to help heal that which is broken in us, which is why I went to divinity school at 30 years old. But God language, the Bible, the church, none of it is for me. And halfway through divinity school, I realized that my resistance to traditional religion was never going to change. I wanted to learn how to pray, how to reflect, and be vulnerable. And I didn't think that the fact that I didn't believe in God or the Bible should hold me back. I, like many of us, have such complicated feelings about the Bible that it's distracting to even try to pray with it. Too many caveats feel necessary to even begin to try. So I asked my favorite professor, Stephanie Paulsell, if she would spend a semester teaching me how to pray with Jane Eyre. Part of treating Jane Eyre as sacred has been an intentional elevation of the novel to more than novel, more than art. I set out to make these characters real for myself by praying with the text and contemplating it as if it were more than a novel. I have conjured these characters into specters, half human, half fiction. I am able to contemplate their suffering as if they were art, but with the tangibility of their summoned realness. So I love the way she conceptualizes this experience and what she got out of this reading. And she has turned this into a years-long practice, as well as something she's welcomed other people into, done like walking with Jane Eyre type of pilgrimages that she hosts. And so it's fascinating that she's rallied people around this concept. And I think for me that was very true as well. She put to words something that I have thought for a long time. I may have even mentioned it here on the channel before, but I very deeply think that when we talk about religious texts, that the only thing that's really special about them is that they have a wide appeal, that for a mass of people, they have made those connections and found those deeper meanings. But I think it's just as much possible for someone to read something like Lord of the Rings and also have that connection and find insights for life in the text there. And it's just a smaller amount of people, but there absolutely are those people out there who are reading Lord of the Rings over and over and over again and finding new things every time and connecting with it very, very deeply as they do. So I think her framing of the sacredness of a thing being, in fact, an act that you do rather than something imbued in the thing itself was so perfect and really brought that to life for me and put it into a context that made sense. So I loved that. There was plenty about this that I didn't necessarily agree with, and a lot of her worldview is very different from mine. So I wasn't 100% on board with every single thing she has to say. Toward the back end, in fact, there was one section where she, over the course of these years of studying the text, has evolved and changed in her ideas. And so something came up in a reading that suddenly she was realizing this is kind of a problem for me. And for me, I would personally just go, okay, this is a problem. This is just something not great in the delivery of the text, right? I would be happy to throw it out. Just, I don't need to understand it further. It's just not great. It's a product of its time, perhaps, or an error, whatever. She instead goes about it in the way that you would for a standard religious text, and she dives into apologetics. And so she is deep diving into this thing and trying to find a new way of looking at it that will allow her to accept it effectively. And so I truly hate apologetics, just in general. I doubt that surprises anyone that knows me or has been around. But yeah, I'm not a fan of apologetics in general. And so it was funny to me to read through that, and also very curious to see someone approach a text like that is not the Bible, because I've really only seen in depth biblical apologetics, or Christian specifically apologetics. And so it's such an odd thing to me that it was entertaining a bit to watch someone walk through that mentally for something other than the Bible. So all around, this was a really fantastic book, and I have bought myself a copy because I want to have it on my shelf. So yeah, I very much enjoyed this, and much like the other books, I do feel like I took away a lot of introspection for myself, and that was really the goal of this reading week, more so than the topic of doing nothing. So I think this fit in well with that, though it was not about doing nothing. This is much more about reading intently instead of just letting it slip by. So this was almost the opposite of my project for the week, but I do think it was a good fit. So that is it for my reading vlog of a weekend of reading about doing nothing. Thank you so very much for joining me and coming along with my mid-month book bash weekend, and hopefully enjoying doing nothing with me as well.